Hello, everyone. Welcome to Becoming Catholic. My name's Anna. And I've wanted to do this for a while to just film a sit down, video where I go into more details about my conversion story. I've definitely shared bits and pieces, but I thought it'd be nice to just have a sit down, like longer format video. I've definitely had people ask about my conversion story, so I also thought it'd be nice to have just one video I could direct people to. So let's just get into it. So I grew up Protestant, going to a non-denominational Bible church my whole life. Wonderful church, amazing people. Nothing bad to say about it. I just wonderful experience with that. So I definitely heard growing up, though, probably negative things about Catholics, just like, probably typical things that Protestants might hear, like they worship Mary, they pray to dead people, things like that, worship the saints. And I never really looked into it at all. But I remember when I met my husband, Zach, he grew up Catholic. So he was a cradle Catholic, but he had a very, just really a not good formation of his faith. He did not know why he believed what he believed. So when we met, I told him, I was like, look, I can't date a Catholic. You're going to have to come to my Bible church. It's awesome. You're going to love it. And so I think like our second date was him coming to my Bible church, and he did love it. And I also remember one of our first dates just asking him like, look, why do you guys pray to Mary? That makes no sense. That's not in the Bible. That's wrong. And like, what's the deal? Why do you make her such a big deal and not just Jesus? Questions like that. And he was kind of like, oh, I don't know. So I was like, well, that doesn't make sense. So anyways, we started going to my Bible church, and he did really love it. Great worship music, awesome people. So we went there, and it was when we were engaged and we were, preparing for marriage. I was looking into just natural ways to track my cycle because I knew I didn't want to take hormonal birth control just for health reasons. I knew it wasn't really good for you. And so I was looking up just natural ways, like natural family planning. And on YouTube, Catholic moms kept popping up talking about natural family planning methods. And I was like, that's interesting. Why are Catholic moms talking about this? And then I believe it was a Catholic Answers video popped up explaining why the Catholic Church teaches that birth control is wrong. And so I watched that video, and I was like, I had never heard this before, that birth control was wrong. Maybe I knew Catholics thought that was wrong. I don't even know if I really knew that. And I was just kind of blown away because everything they were saying, I completely agreed with. And I was like, this actually really makes sense. And I really like everything they're saying. Then I was like, what else do Catholics believe? And so I just went down this rabbit hole of Catholic Answers videos where Protestants would call in with their questions, and just everything they were talking about, the Protestant person would call in, and I was like, oh, that's definitely a question I have. And I believe what our Protestant is saying, let's see what these guys are going to say. And then they always just had such well thought out, obviously correct answers. And it was just like blowing my mind. I was like, I've never heard these things before. And so I just kept wanting to learn more. It's like I got bit by a bug and I just couldn't stop learning. And so I remember telling Zach, because we were just engaged, and I was like, look, I don't want to use birth control. Like, I think we should just be open to life in marriage and like some of these things I've been learning. And he's awesome. And he was like, okay, that sounds fine to me. Like, I agree. And so we just went into marriage, like agreeing with that. But in my world, that was like, from what I grew up with, it wasn't a question of, are you going to, use birth control? It was like, what birth control are you going to use? Like, of course you need to wait a couple years to have kids. That was very much the mindset, I think, of what I kind of grew up hearing. So, but we were just very open to life from the beginning because of those things that I had learned. And so going into marriage, I was, wanting to learn more about Catholicism. And so I would just start to kind of ask Zach, like, hey, maybe we should go visit a mass. Like, I want to see these pretty Catholic churches. And And so I was definitely more interested in it than he was at the beginning. And I tried to kind of bug him, like, please come to this class with me. I started wanting to go to RCIA, and we had just been married a few months. And he kind of went to one or two, but then he was like, I'm really not interested in going back to that. So I decided to drop it, but I never really stopped looking into it. And, I would just watch Catholic Answers videos like on our TV on YouTube, and we would just kind of watch those in the evenings, but I wasn't like seriously pursuing it. I also just knew in the back of my mind, like, how could I ever really convert? Like I, had always grown up going to the same church. All my friends and family were, Protestant, and I just couldn't even imagine actually leaving that because I was just so comfortable with that. And that's just how I always pictured my life being. And then definitely when Zach was not on board with it, I just kind of dropped it. And so, but like I said, and I also, when I was just learning about all this, I would buy books. I bought a rosary off of Etsy, and I didn't even completely understand what the rosary was, but I remember just being so drawn to it and drawn to the beauty. And I just wanted to learn more. And so I bought this beautiful rosary that it said it was made by a nun in France. And I still have this rosary, but I remember like fumbling my way through it. And before I prayed it, I was like, dear God, if this is wrong and sinful, please forgive me. I just really want to pray this. And anyway, so I never forgot that, like in our first home we lived in, doing that. So, but I kind of dropped it. And then when COVID happened, so that was 2018 that we got married, and we got pregnant with our first 3 months after we got married. And then in 2020 during COVID, when churches were shutting down, it just got us looking into more things. Both Zach and I, and we were just started, wanting to look into more maybe church options, and we started asking more questions. And so we, started kind of looking into the Catholic Church again. And, here and there we would still during this time, like we visited a midnight mass when our daughter was a baby. We were just kind of like still drawn to it, but didn't want to fully take that leap. So during COVID, we were looking into it more. And then Zach just so happened to meet a new friend in 2020. Was it 2020 or 2021? I believe this was 2020. So this new friend had on a shirt that said something about being Catholic, be bold in your Catholic faith, something like that. And so Zach, he said to him, he's like, oh, I used to be Catholic. I like your shirt. My wife's actually like looking into Catholicism, just trying to make conversation. And then this new friend invited us. He said, you need to check out the Latin Mass. I go to a Latin Mass. Like, please, will you come on Sunday? And so Zach, I remember coming home and being like, oh, I met this new friend. He's so nice. And we're going to go to Mass with him on Sunday. It's a Latin Mass, and neither of us had ever heard of a Latin Mass, even Zach growing up Catholic. And I was like, what is that? So I remember us Googling, like on the way to Mass, what is a Latin Mass? We had just, we had been to a regular Novus Ordo Mass, of course, multiple times, but, and, he was like, try, like dress nice. And so we were excited and nervous, and we had our baby. I guess at this point we had, I don't remember, 2 babies maybe. And I should have written all this down and gotten all the details right. But anyways, and I remember like I was the only woman without a veil on. And I was just like, we walked in and, all the women had veils, and it was actually in an auditorium, but it was still just so reverent, and just seeing the way everyone just showed such reverence during this Mass. And, of course it was all in Latin except for the homily, and we didn't know what was going on, but it was just such a beautiful and truly life-changing moment. We were like, we've never experienced anything like this before, and we wanted to learn more. We definitely left just being like, what was that? That was amazing. And I believe like during the announcements at Mass, they mentioned like a conversion class. And so I remember after that Mass, Zach said, you should go to that conversion class. Like, we should learn more. So we did, or I did. So I started going to that class. I think it was still not immediate. Like, I remember emailing them, and, I didn't go to the classes right away. It was just such a slow process, but I was really open to it, and we wanted to learn more. So I started going to the conversion classes in, I believe, the early spring or summer of 2022. And Zach would actually come with me sometimes, which was nice because he didn't know very much about his faith or, why he believed what Catholics believe. And so once I started going to the classes and learning from our priest, it was just amazing. I could not get enough. I kept wanting to learn more. And we just met so many amazing people, so many Catholics on fire for their faith. And that was just life-changing. You're like, what do you guys have? I want that, And I remember I was really struggling with Mary. Like, I was like, I just cannot understand why they have all these statues of Mary. It's just, it feels like too much. I don't understand. And so I was explaining this to one of my new Catholic friends, and she was like, just encouraged me to get some books just about Mary, to just really learn more about her and why the church teaches what they teach and all that about Mary. So I did that. I went to a Catholic bookstore. I got some books and I just started learning. And I remember the book Jesus and the Jewish Roots of Mary by Bront Petre. I can't remember how to say his name, but I read that book, and that especially just really opened my eyes to why the church teaches what they teach about Mary. And so anyways, that was a slow process of, understanding all of that. But yeah, I just couldn't get enough of learning all about it. And everything I learned, I just wanted to keep learning more. It was amazing. So we started going to Mass, every Sunday there. And like I said, when Zach would come to classes, we would learn together. And then we, our priest told us that we had to get our marriage convalidated, because since Zach was a baptized Catholic and we were married outside the Catholic Church, they were like, you really have to be married in the Catholic Church. So we did have to live as brother and sister for a few months, just, in our house, but separate rooms and all that. So, yeah, it was such a process, but it was, amazing. So then in February of 2023 is when the girls and I got baptized. And that's when Zach went back to confession. And, so we received those sacraments. And then we had our marriage convalidated in March of 2023, shortly after the baptisms. And yeah, it was amazing. And I remember when my classes were over, I missed them. And I was like, can I just come back to the classes for fun? I asked our father that, and he was like, I guess if you want to, which I didn't end up doing that because we had a baby. But yeah. And then I didn't end up getting confirmed until 2025, I believe. Yes. Because we had a baby. And so I didn't end up taking that test that year. And then anyways, so my confirmation came a little later, but, yeah, it's been awesome. And, of course there's some growing pains, in our life as far as being, just doing things differently than we had been, and doing things differently than our friends and family. But, some people, when they convert, it can be very stressful, and maybe people in their lives react very poorly. We didn't experience any of that. That was not our story at all. But it was definitely hard to leave what we were used to. And even Zach, he didn't grow up going to a traditional Latin Mass or being in a traditional parish or anything like that. So even just him coming back to the Catholic Church, it was very different than what he grew up with. But it's been amazing. And I can't say enough just wonderful things about the traditional Latin Mass and all of the amazing friends that we've met and made through that. But yeah, so I hope that explains my conversion story a bit. There's just so many things I could get into within that, but that's kind of a concise little story for you guys. So anyways, thank you for watching. If you have any questions, anything else you want me to expand upon, please drop it in the comments, and I will get to that. So thank you guys. Bye.